Good evening, everyone. I would like to call this meeting of the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board Committee of the Whole to order. Acknowledging that we are meeting this evening from many locations in the ancestral homelands of the Algonquin Nation, unceded and unsurrendered since time immemorial. I would like to thank the Algonquin people for hosting us on their land and for sharing their knowledge of this land and the wisdom of their ancestors with us as settlers in this place. I would like now to ask if anyone has any declarations of interest to declare. Please declare now. And I am not seeing any declarations. So I will move on and ask for a motion to approve the agenda. Trustee Nash, are there any changes to the agenda this evening? And I'm not seeing any, so I will call the question on the agenda. All those in favor? And opposed, and the motion is carried. That brings us to the briefing from the chair of the board, Trustee Lyra.
Thank you. The Education Quality and Accountability Office, EQAO, has released board and school level results for provincial assessments conducted during the 2022-2023 school year. This data will play an important role in identifying trends to inform specific strategies to support students in support of student achievement and learning. In the coming weeks, our staff will be working on an update on student learning, which will be presented to the Board of Trustees. Additional information will be available at that time, providing an important opportunity for discussion about student achievement. Parents and caregivers are encouraged to attend our family conference on Saturday, November 4th at Brookfield High School. It will include a keynote presentation from Ontario Poet Laureate Rendell Adijah, along with a number of workshops on topics such as supports for English language learners, mental health and well-being, success in kindergarten, special education, and more. Some of these sessions will be available in Arabic. This is a free event and registration details can be found on our website. The Education Foundation of Ottawa is seeking candidates to serve on its board of directors. In particular, they are looking for individuals with skills and experience related to strategic planning, finance, law, marketing and communications, fundraising, event planning, or board leadership. This is an excellent opportunity to support an organization that makes such a valuable contribution to OCDSB students. More details can be found on their website at www.educationfoundationottawa.ca. Consultation regarding the new Finlay Creek Elementary School will begin this month. Working groups will be formed and active in November, and a public consultation will be held in December. Consultation on the school naming policy has now closed. The ad hoc policy committee reviewed the final draft at their meeting on October 12th, and a recommendation for approval will come to the board at the end of the month. In addition, this week is Local Government Week for the Ontario Public School Boards Association. The aim of the week is to increase youth and public awareness about the important role local government plays in our communities. Additional information may be found on OBSPA's website, opsba.org. Finally, as a reminder, the next meeting of the Board of Trustees will be held on Monday, October 30th, as opposed to Tuesday, October 31st. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Chair Lara. Are there any questions for the chair? And I'm not seeing any, so we will move on to a briefing from the director.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to begin by noting that we extend our deepest condolences to those family and loved ones, friends and acquaintances who have been affected by the violence and humanitarian crisis currently taking place in the Middle East. Through this difficult time, our focus has been on how we can best support the needs of students, staff, and school communities, particularly those who are Israeli, Palestinian, Muslim, or Jewish. This support includes arranging student support groups for Jewish and Muslim students, providing resources for educators to approach these issues from a trauma-informed perspective, keeping in close contact with community organizations and faith leaders, working with the Ottawa Police Service to ensure the safety and security of our students and staff, monitoring for and or being prepared to address anti-Semitism, anti-Palestinian racism, Islamophobia, or other forms of hate should it arise in our schools and our central departments. Should any students and their families feel they require additional support, they are encouraged, of course, to contact their school's administration. In addition, I'd like to share that the initial learning updates at the secondary level, formerly known as the progress reports, were emailed to parents and guardians and eligible students earlier today. Should there be any issues for students and parents and guardians, please encourage their school's administration. Thank you.
And do we have any questions for the director this evening? And again, Ms. Lyon from PIC. No questions. Moving on then, the next item on our agenda is delegations. And we do not have any delegations this evening. So that brings us to reports from statutory and other committees, beginning with the report from the Parent Involvement Committee from 13 September 2023. Do we have a mover for that? Trustee Nash, thank you. Are there any errors or omissions in this report? Seeing none, all those in favor of receipt of this report and opposed, the motion is carried. And secondly, the Special Education Advisory Committee, the report from 6 September 2023. Do we have a mover? Trustee Dixon. And again, I will ask, are there any errors or omissions in this report? And seeing none, I'll call the question on receipt. All those in favor and opposed, and that motion is carried. Moving on then to matters for action. Item 9.1, notice of motion regarding letter requesting the appointment of an urban Indigenous trustee. Trustee Bell.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Great. Thank you. And with your indulgence, Chair, I would like to pass over the time for introduction to Lily Miller, representative of the Indigenous Education Council.
Go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. Thank you, Trustee Bell, and I'm very grateful that this motion that seeks the approval of the province for an OCDSB urban Indigenous trustee is back on the table. I hope that trustees will unanimously approve this motion and send a clear and unified message that the Indigenous voices and representation do matter. So for years, the appointment of an urban Indigenous trustee with voting power has been a top priority of the Indigenous Education Council. And the first letter from the board was sent February 2021, and we had hope at that point. But unfortunately, the province has not responded. So the original request and this follow-up request aligns with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action. It aligns with the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, and also aligns with the commitments made by the province on reconciliation. So all of these commitments boil down to the importance of having a voice and having decision-making abilities. So I've seen the board take really great strides, prioritizing Indigenous students. I see reconciliation in the strategic plan, graduation coaches, and the creation of an Indigenous student trustee, no voting power, and also providing Indigenous delegates the time that is needed to delegate. And that aligns with our traditional ways. But more really needs to be done. For years, we've been talking about the disproportionately low graduation rates and the high suspension rates among Indigenous students. And so as far as this Indigenous trustee goes, the IAC is committed to working with the board and the province to determine the best way to appoint an urban Indigenous trustee in alignment with Algonquin protocols. But having an Indigenous urban trustee at the OCDSB table would really demonstrate to our students and to the Indigenous community in Ottawa and the entire country that the OCDSB is committed to meaningful reconciliation and that the voices of the Indigenous community do matter. Reconciliation is taking action. So this letter is reconciliation in action. Thanks.
Thank you for that introduction. And I have first next speaker as Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to see that this motion is being brought forth. I'm sad that it's being brought forth again. I'd like to thank Lily Miller for bringing this and for that introduction, and thank you to Trustee Bell as well. I'm wondering, in addition to writing this letter to the province, and please correct me if I'm wrong, that we can also include a public call, because this is the second time we're writing this letter to the province. It should only be asked once, I think. And if there's any feedback or way we can do this in an effective manner publicly, I'm willing to work with our colleagues at IEC and others on the board to make sure that you know, we're doing this publicly, not to kind of make news, but because this is the second time we're asking for something that should have been done the first. Thank you.
Other speakers to the motion? Trustee Lyra.
I just wanted to very briefly say, one, I'm going to be in support of this, but two, all of our letters are public. So the last one was a public letter. This one will be a public letter. This is a public meeting. So of course the ministry should know this is coming, but all of our letters are public. Thank you.
Additional speakers? Ms. Lyon.
Just thank you, Madam Chair. Just through you, I was wondering, are there any other urban Indigenous trustees in the province or across the country? And how does that appointment process work? Thank you.
Director.
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe there are other Indigenous student trustees that are or regular board members. Yes, through you, Madam Chair, my apologies. I thought it was with respect to student trustees. In terms of regular trustees, there are some of that is conditional with those districts that have a reciprocal agreement in place that facilitate that process, as opposed to districts who may not have a reciprocal agreement in place, such as ours with our Indigenous partners.
I see puzzlement on your face. The reciprocal agreement is an agreement between the board and an Indigenous nation to provide education to students, particularly from a particular reserve area within the district's jurisdiction. And we don't have such a situation, so we don't have the ability to enter such an agreement, and therefore, by the regulation of the province, we can't ask to have an Indigenous trustee appointed unless the regulation is changed.
So if I may, just a quick follow-up. For communities that don't have reciprocal agreements with any First Nations in their region, are there school boards in that position that have appointed urban Indigenous trustees? I'm wondering, maybe Toronto District School Board does have reciprocal. I don't know. I'm just asking, are there others that you're aware of?
Through you, Madam Chair, and I'll look to any member of staff who has any additional perspective, but I don't believe without the reciprocal agreement, there are district school boards who would have an Indigenous trustee in place.
So we could show some leadership in appointing one.
Are there any other speakers to this? Seeing none, I will go back to the mover, Trustee Bell, for wrap up.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. I would like to wrap up by expressing my deep gratitude to Lily Miller, to Monique Minach, Innie, and all of the members of the Indigenous Education Council. They've been working very hard behind the scenes to find the best way to work with the province to fix this regulation, to make sure that we can have representation in urban centers. Again, as we heard clearly from Lily Miller, representation matters, voice matters. And this will be a clear demonstration of reconciliation in action. The fact that we as a board is sending a follow-up letter, but if we can take it the next step further by the province taking action to allow us the opportunity to appoint an Indigenous trustee, will send a very clear signal across the country that we are taking reconciliation with the Algonquin nations and with all of the nations that come to our school here in the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board. So again, thank you very much. I really hope this passes unanimously.
Thank you, Trustee Bell. And I will call the question then on the recommendation that's before us. Could we have it on the screen, please? And if the only part we're voting on is that therefore be it resolved part. That a follow-up letter be sent to the Minister of Education regarding that the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board be allowed to appoint an Indigenous trustee.
That a follow-up letter be sent to the Minister of Education requesting that the Ottawa-Carleton District School Board be allowed to appoint an Indigenous trustee. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I'm reading it at a distance here. So I will call the question. All those in favor of the recommendation? And those opposed? And the motion, I believe, has carried unanimously. Thank you very much, Trustee Bell. And that brings us to the next matter for action. And that is report 23-071, board work plan and areas of focus. Mr. Director.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'll turn this over to our Executive Officer of Corporate Services, Michelle Giroux.
Thank you very much. You have in your package a report on the key areas of focus and work plan. And I'll just run through, I think the board is probably familiar, but this is the first year for the board going through this. And so annually the board approves a work plan for the school year. And in fact, the policy that governs the board's annual evaluation process requires that the board do an annual reflection and excuse me, that out of that reflection process, it identify its areas of focus. And so earlier this year, the annual reflection questionnaire was distributed to trustees, and the board met to review the results of their reflection and to talk about what they've accomplished in the first year of their term, and where they had strengths and where they had opportunities for growth. And, you know, I think we need to keep in mind, we're not yet at the 1 year mark for this board. And it was a busy first year. We put forward a very, very robust trustee orientation program. And we had excellent participation in that, and understanding the delivery of public education is a pretty complex business. So congratulations to all of you for the tremendous amount of learning. In addition to that, the board did, of course, approve a new strategic plan, which sets priorities for the next year, approved its $1.1 billion budget with some serious changes in terms of financing, and of course, hired a new director of education. So quite a bit to be proud of. But the board also in that conversation talked about areas for growth, and really identified the need for open communication to build trust and respect amongst colleagues. And, you know, that's a growing thing in terms of debating complex political issues, transparency in decision-making, and leading with kindness. And so thinking through that conversation, and then thinking through the fiduciary roles of the board and the priorities in the strat plan, the board, and you'll see the strat plans on the screen there. We have reflected the board's thinking into the annual work plan. And so we move from the strat plans on the screen, built on those pillars of learning, well-being, and social responsibility. And we carry that through, if we move to the next slide, to in the work plan, did a little bit of a visual representation of how the board and staff work together with that sort of community engagement in the center, and thinking about what the board's work in terms of setting direction and monitoring the work to make sure that those strategic priorities that have been established flow, are being implemented. The allocation of resources to support that, advocacy, and we've already tonight talked a little bit about advocacy, and working together to approve decisions. You know, on the staff side, we've got the operationalization of that strategic plan, the implementation of details, the big thinking that goes into policies, procedures, and programs, so the design piece, whereas the board has the approval piece. Of course, some of that background research that informs the recommendations we make. So that brings us then to the board work plan. And if we move to the next slide, sort of thinking about what are some of the big things that the board will need to work on this year. So looking at those three key areas, a sort of deeper monitoring of achievement with a focus on review of programs and services that support learning, and the development of math and literacy action plans. And so over the next few months, you're going to see some reporting on that. We're going to have a student achievement report. We're giving a lot of thought to how we do reporting. You'll recall in the spring, we brought you what was the first student achievement report you saw. It was dense. It's kind of like a big piece that comes and then it's sort of hard to work through, like how many questions can you ask in the time that's available. And so for your benefit and for our benefit and the benefit of the system, we're actually taking that report and breaking it down into some smaller pieces, so that what we bring you is a piece of information where we talk a little bit about some of that data rather than everything all in one piece. I think it's better for everyone in conversation, but also in use, because one of the frustrations we have as a system is we want to be evidence informed. We want data to drive our decision making. But when we get these very complex reports, it's hard to drill down and stay focused on them. So how do we carry that? So that's an area that we'll be working with you on. And one of the, as we touch a little bit, I'll come back to PD, but as we touch on PD, looking at trying to do some PD around equity and data analysis. So understanding how to do that. We've benefited from some of that work and hope that you will too. Excuse me. In the area of well-being, a real emphasis on supporting organizational well-being in two big areas. One, an employee wellness, three big areas. Employee wellness strategy. We really know from some of the pieces that we looked at how much we need to focus on employee wellness and how that is a foundation for student well-being. but also school safety plans. So you'll see a lot more talking about school safety plans and building those plans around the conditions for learning. So not just talking about safety, but talking about the integration of learning and making learning and designing safety around the conditions for learning. And of course, mental health strategy. You'll see a renewal of that mental health plan and a lot more specific initiatives over the next year. Under social responsibility, early in the new year, we've got identified bringing back the renewal of the Indigenous Equity and Human Rights Roadmap. I know that's come up several times around this table, and it's keen to see that. One of the things we'll be working on this year is renewing the collection of identity-based data. So that will be important to our data cycle. And of course, lots of other equity work, both to close achievement gaps, but also to inform our practice in the classroom and in our community partnerships. The other piece in terms of social responsibility, two things that came up there. One is greening. Had a lot of conversation at budget and over the last year about greening and sustainability, and also about leadership development, and both leadership development in HR terms, but also in organizational terms. So lots there. You'll see we've broken that down into fiduciary responsibilities. Tried to capture on the left-hand side, what is some of the core work that school boards are required to do. There are reports and actions for the board on all of those pieces. On the, on what is my right-hand side, strategies and opportunity. So what do we look at there? So one, we talked a little bit about this last year, focusing decision-making on students, right? How do we keep our conversations focused on the classroom as our priority area? So lots of professional development opportunities. We talked a little bit about that. Some timelines there. I know you've had 2 PD sessions already and another one scheduled for November, and currently in the process of sorting out with facilitators an anti-hate toolkit training session. And I mentioned that one in particular because that anti-hate toolkit training session is being designed for trustees in your role as constituent relationship managers. So lots of times we focus our PD on your fiduciary responsibilities and your role as governors of the board. When we looked at anti-hate and we were thinking about the kinds of issues we heard in the development of the strat plan and the kind of work that you're doing and what our experience has been in dealing with hate, we talked about what decisions do we make about the skills and knowledge that our leaders need in schools around understanding hate and dealing with hate, and really thought that trustees experience much of that in their relationship management with constituents. So how do you navigate those complex emails? How do you get some of, those pieces, those public interactions? And that's not an area we've gone really into before, focusing on your constituency responsibilities, but I think a really important piece to recognize. Lots of other things there. I won't get into them now, but we'll update you as we go. So providing you with more measurement, looking at how do we increase participation and consultation and community partnerships, and more coming there. Advocacy strategy, we talked about that. And of course, increasing alignment of our budget with strategic priorities. So key areas there. What I want to show you now is the translation of our strat plan and the board work plan, and some of the work that we're doing as a senior team to make sure that we're focused on rolling out the priorities that you've set. So as we shift to the next slide, this slide is a high level version of the staff work plan that we've been working on. And this really, we've been working on a document that gets more detailed in terms of who does what when and the metrics and the pieces. And we're not entirely done that work yet, but it's a big guiding piece for us. And as we looked at it and we talked about readiness, we thought what we need for your benefit is to have an overview of the work we're doing. And so what this does is it takes, and if we just slip to the next slide, so you see, I like to say it's one page, but it's 2 pages. So you'll see that there are 9 boxes in this. And if we go back to the first previous page, so divided by learning, well-being, and social responsibility. And so under learning, on the left-hand side, you see there improved student literacy. Then of course we have improved mathematics, and then we have improved program quality. So some of the key pieces of work that we're looking at over the next year in terms of doing that. And some of this you'll be familiar with, and some of it we will be coming back in reports to you, or there'll be new language coming. So for example, the K-12 literacy plan, and also in math, we'll be sharing some information with you about, you know, what the new ministry directives are. But what you're going to see is those things come together in our, oh, now I've been off and I'm going to mess up the words. It used to be the BIPSA, and then it was the BIPSA, and then it was the SIPSA, and the new name is?
Student Achievement Plan.
There you go, simplified. So although we've got all these pieces and there's lots of work in terms of building capacity, educator resources, fidelity of curriculum, all of those pieces, that's our language for us. You're going to see a consolidation of that into one report. So there's not a one-to-one reporting on all of these things, but we wanted to give you this bird's eye view of the key work to be done over the next year. So we've got that. I'm not going to run through it all, but if we just go to the next slide, you can see, so under well-being, we had mental health, we had school safety plans, we had employee wellness strategy. And so I just want to talk about school safety plans because I was talking about setting the conditions for learning as in our school safety plan. And you'll see in the first bullet there, it talks about conditions for learning kits. We've already rolled that out to our administrators, identifying the conditions for learning, and then thinking about training, restorative practices, bullying prevention and intervention planning, anti-sex trafficking, some information for parents, some information for schools, our Safe Schools Anonymous Reporting tool, working with trauma affected students, some of those pieces there. So lots of pieces there coming forward. And again, you'll see similar things, leadership development and improved environmental sustainability. What you should see in this is a lot of those bits and pieces that came in our conversation about the strat plan over the last year and what it was looking like, or some of those rich conversations we had at this table and where would we see that, or some of those budget conversations about resource allocation. You'll see pieces of those pick up in here. And I know this piece is a lot for us tonight, but wanted to give you that overview to express our commitment that, you know, we started from here. And we went through your reflection process and thought about your work and then the board work plan. And then really we take that as a team and the day-to-day work of it is happening. And our job is to report to you on the work that we're doing and what that looks like. And so I'm going to pause there. That was a lot of introduction and happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for that report. And I am assured that those last one or two slides, the staff work plan slide will be shared with trustees.
Yes, that's a hot off the press today document.
So I understand. Thank you for that. I have a bit of a speakers list beginning with trustee Milburn and then trustee Lyra and trustee Bell. Trustee Milburn.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I am wondering if staff can expand on how we're planning on holding ourselves accountable to this work plan and how we're going to be reporting back to our constituents and to the public a bit more, please.
So the board work plan is, I believe, on the board agenda as a regular check-in piece. And so you know, I think that we've been a little bit hit and miss sometimes about how much time we spend talking about that. And I think there's an opportunity for us to think about that. We did have a good experience in the strategic planning process about actually putting that on the agenda and making sure we had something to talk about. And I think there's some modeling there for us to think about. There are some regular reporting pieces, right, that come naturally that are more definitive. But to your point, I think there is a piece where we can be a little bit more specific about those conversations on the work plan, and maybe we can do some highlighting. We're asking some questions, and that individually and collectively, you're focusing on that conversation as well.
Through you, Madam Chair, if I can have a follow-up to that. So I can see a lot of hard work and love has gone into the strategic plan, and it's truly a reflection of what we believe as trustees and staff for this board. What I will say is I think it's very important to have the follow through for any work plan on how we're going to report back to the people that we are accountable to, the public. So perhaps there is an opportunity to explore some form of reporting structure that involves metrics, especially when we see things, and I apologize, it's off the screen now, but when we see things like improved student literacy, having goals, even if they are stretch goals, is very important to keep track of. And it helps us have a conversation when it comes to budget and advocacy for our provincial partners. If we can say with increased funding, this is what we could do and this is how we can achieve it. So I would really like if staff can do some thinking about how we are going to be reporting back to the public and to the trustees and to our constituents, because it is at the end of the day who we are most accountable to. I don't know if staff want to comment.
Through you, Madam Chair, just building on Executive Officer Giroux's comments, and I appreciate Trustee Milburn's perspective. We're looking in the area of how will we measure our progress? What are those metrics, those measurables in literacy? Beyond measures that we have in principle, like provincial assessments that are sort of externally driven, which ones are internally driven? The notion, as you'll see, the provincial government with an evolving landscape is working their way through with various partners, including our Federation Union partners around screeners and other diagnostics, that type of concept. So we're getting some ministry direction on that. We're looking at that as well, because I do appreciate Trustee Milburn's perspective on metrics, qualitative and quantitative in nature, to make sure that we're balancing what we see in numbers with what we hear in perspective or see for ourselves in our classrooms.
If I may just have one more closing remark. So I would like to say that I think the idea of bringing this back as a standing item on either COW or a board meeting wherever appropriate, so that we can have a discussion about the progress that the district is making, is a great idea, and would love to see it as a reoccurring agenda item. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Trustee Milburn. Trustee Dyra.
Thank you, Chair. So I want to echo what Trustee Milburn said about accountability. I really would love to see targets in here, even if they are aspirational targets, even if they are best case targets. And even if we set targets and don't meet them, I think it's better to set targets and not meet them than to not set targets and claim victory regardless of how well we do. I'm also really glad that you used the words "close the gap," because I think it's really important to note that when we're talking about student achievement, when we're talking about success for our students, who is getting that success? If we're going to raise the literacy rate by 5%, I would like to make sure that we are raising the literacy rate for those who are struggling the most, and not just having those who are already succeeding at reading run victory laps. So I'm glad that you said the words "close the gap," but I don't see them in the board work plan. I don't see us in the board work plan anywhere point out that we are intentionally trying to make sure that we are raising the floor. Do you have a comment on where we might see that in the future?
You'll see that in the student achievement plan when we come forward. That will be more specific targets, and they'll be grade focused.
Okay. And in addition to grade focused, it'll be raising the floor, it'll be closing the achievement gap?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Dyra. Trustee Bell.
Great. Thank you so much, Michelle Giroux and team for these outlines, this plan, and for bringing this forward. I'm hoping that I believe it's under our third area of action. we speak to greening, and I'm wondering why the choice of words of greening. And if I may, it would be great if we could actually see the words sustainable environment or environmental sustainability. By having those specific words, we then align with what the province, what the country, and actually what the globe is doing to fight climate change. Greening, I think, is an important, from my understanding, is an important component of environmental sustainability. But what I remember from the consultations and from the strategic plan, it was very important that we take a greater perspective that aligns with what different levels of government are doing. I'm also just looking quickly, as I was from my screen, at the Strategic Action Implementation Plan. I'm wondering where the review of elementary programming is, and if that fits into this level of planning. If you could speak to that, Michelle, that would, or Drew, that would be very great. Thank you.
Absolutely. So two questions there. One was around greening. I may have used the word greening, but in the document and in the plan, it is, the goal is improved environmental sustainability. So I think the language is on track. I may just have used greening as a reference. And your second question was around program quality. And so under the learning pillar, the third goal is improved program quality. And the items under there are around developing an elementary program review framework, reporting on baseline data to inform the review process, also looking at some of the work we've been doing in terms of continuing education in adult high school. And we'll also have some follow-up in some other program areas. So that's where you'll see them.
Trustee Bell.
Great, thank you very much.
Did you intend to make an amendment? Because you can't make an amendment to the work plan because we don't have the motion on the floor yet.
No, I'm good, but I would be happy to put the motion on the floor if that's what you're giving me the looks for.
Well, at some point in our discussion, we do need to have it on the floor, and then it might be possible for people to propose specific amendments, which are probably better done here than they would be when we come to board. So I will appreciate your putting that forward as the motion. And if you would like to make an amendment, you may do it now or you may do it later.
I will choose to do it later, but thank you very much for this opportunity to bring this motion forward. I think the staff have done and continue to do an incredible job with really distilling the information that we have all brought and our communities have brought to the table, our educators and our students. And I'm excited about getting more concrete about what we're actually going to accomplish this year and how we're going to be accountable for it.
Thank you, Trustee Bell. Moving on then, I have Trustee Dixon and then Seema Lamba from ACE. Trustee Dixon? No? So moving on then to Ms. Lamba from the Advisory Committee on Equity.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
So I just had a few questions. One was it could be just my lack of understanding between the two the fiduciary and then the other sort of thing. Where does actually that directive that came from the ministry a few years ago before this new board around the equitable staffing? I didn't actually see anything reflected in this plan, either from a staff perspective or whatever perspective there may be around that. So that's my one question.
So I think in terms of the plan, what this really focuses on is big areas of work in terms of implementing the new strategic plan. So the equitable recruitment policy. The directive from the ministry came, the policy was approved by this board, and it is in effect. And so we continue to implement that policy, and we continue to do work to refine and enhance or expand our recruitment processes to be compliant with that policy and to ensure, for example, training on equitable recruitment, et cetera. If there is, there are some other areas in this plan when we look at the leadership development and mentorship piece that's referenced under the leadership development strategy. The sort of practical application of that policy will appear in some of that work as well. So I think that's where it gets reflected.
I didn't see the reporting part of it, like the systems reviews and then the reporting, identifying gaps. I think that was all part of it, if I believe. And in fact, I was trying to find the equitable policy on the board website, but it seems that I can't access it. So I apologize for not being able to tell you exactly what but it's out of memory that there were things around reporting, data gathering, and looking at gaps, systems reviews, things like that. So it went beyond just the actual recruitment piece.
Absolutely, and that work is all underway. I want to be careful in saying that there is lots of work that happens in the system that isn't reflected in these documents, right? So that's not to say that some of the work under the equitable hiring policy won't get reflected. For example, when we do the renewal of the roadmap, you might see some pieces reflected in there. When we do the leadership development strategy, you might see some pieces in there. But all of that to say, there's still a commitment to doing that work and advancing that agenda, but not everything that we do is documented in these documents. This is about where we're pushing to drive some of that change. So there's a balance there, and I'm sure the superintendent at an appropriate time can speak more to the specific work that's underway, but I can assure you that there's lots of work underway in that respect.
Anything further, Ms. Lamba?
Well, I think my time might be up. I couldn't see the timer, so you can put me back on the list if my time is up.
You still have 1 minute and 40 seconds or thereabouts.
Okay. My next question there are questions, is around the roadmap. I saw that it was going to be renewed. So I guess it has to be like reviewed and renewed and all that. And often, I mean, I shouldn't say often, but in the past, I think we've used that roadmap to actually inform us in every other areas. How is that going to be played out? Like, what's the intent around the roadmap, the equity roadmap? Thanks.
Not sure that I understand the question. I'll answer what I think the question is. And so what does the process for renewing the roadmap look like? We have the roadmap. We've got a lot of commitments. We've made a lot of good progress in the roadmap. Although the roadmap has a timeline that goes to 2023, that work will continue. And when we come forward in the new year, I anticipate that we will come forward with a report that talks a little bit of where we're at with those commitments and a little bit about what the work looks like to renew some of the next step commitments, because I think there are some community consultations and conversations that will inform that work. Hopefully that gets to the question.
It does. Thank you for that. That process is useful to know. And then I guess my question is, sometimes we used the roadmap in the past to sort of inform some of the areas that we really needed to focus on from an equity perspective. So I was just like, are we doing things in parallel, or are we going to just continue to use the roadmap that we have, right? And use that as informed? Because in the past, and this could be just my perception, when we would have a topic of whatever topic it was, we always sort of looked at it from that roadmap, the equity roadmap framework. If that makes any sense.
I think we should talk a little bit about the architecture of things for the benefit of everyone else. So how the roadmap came to be is that the board approved its previous strategic plan. And that established priorities for the 4-year cycle. And embedded in that plan was a commitment to equity. The roadmap was a document that was created in order to address the equity priorities that were contained in that strategic plan. And so it was the sort of zoom in on equity document and framework for how we were going to achieve some of those equity objectives. And so some of those, considerable work has been done in many of those areas, but some of those things will still have ongoing work. And in some areas, we have new areas of focus. For example, we have already started work on the anti-hate toolkit. But that's an example that may not have been called out as clearly in the roadmap when we started that document, but it is an area of focus that we're working on now, right? So that'll be part of the conversation over the next years. Where are those new areas of focus? Where are some of the areas where we've made progress? And then that becomes part of our regular work. And where are some of the new areas of focus or goal setting and targets?
Ms. Lamba, anything further? And we seem to have lost Ms. Lamba.
Sorry, that was me, I think. Is that better?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Was there anything further?
Yes, it's just a really quick thought or a question. During those lists of those PD events that's going to happen for the trustees, there are some that are focused on equity. If it's possible to consider maybe the advisory committee folks like myself and Lily to be there, so that we can see what's being presented. So, when we have these meetings, I know what the framework is as well. I'd appreciate that just as a consideration. Thanks.
Thank you for that suggestion. Moving on then, I have Trustee Aziz, and then I believe I saw Trustee Lee's hand. No? So Trustee Aziz?
Thank you, Chair. And to clarify, we do have this as a motion on the floor, correct?
Yes, we do.
Thank you. I would like to propose 2 amendments to the document. 2 separate amendments. The first is to replace the word greening in the 3rd row, where it says social responsibility. The second bullet says develop greening and leadership development and mentoring plans, and replace greening with sustainability.
Just sustainability or environmental sustainability?
Environmental sustainability.
So this is on the first page of the board work plan.
Yes.
Under beside the red box, it says social responsibility.
Yes.
Does everyone understand what this amendment would be? And the next question is this a friendly amendment?
So for the benefit of the
Chair.
for the benefit of the committee coordinator, it would be develop environmental sustainability, comma, leadership development, comma, and mentorship plans.
That makes sense grammatically.
So now that we have clear language, I will ask again, is this friendly?
May I ask staff?
And I'm seeing several objections. So introduce your amendment, please. Trustee Aziz.
Thank you, Chair. Based on the concerns that I've heard and in understanding the word greening versus environmental sustainability, and hearing our commitments as a school board and in alignment with the provincial and federal commitments to environmental sustainability, climate change, and what is the reality of the climate crisis. I think just solidifying that in our board work plan seems simple. Our students know it, our constituents know it. We went through what is probably just a taste of what is to come in terms of the forthcoming climate crisis. So I think this is a simple amendment to what is our social responsibility as stewards of this land, as we often discuss before the meetings begin. Thank you.
Thank you. So speakers to the amendment. Trustee Blackburn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry, I had to change devices, so I wasn't sure. May I get a staff comment on how they perceive the change in language, please?
I have no concerns with the change in language. It's consistent with the language in the strat plan and in the action plan.
Okay, so you don't see it as a, like, potentially higher costs or anything?
Nope.
Anything further, Trustee Blackburn?
That's all, Madam Chair. Thank you, Executive Officer.
And are there any other speakers on the amendment? I'm not seeing any, so back to Trustee Aziz for wrap up, if any.
Just want to thank Executive Officer Giroux for answering that question, because it was another concern that's come up before. So thank you both.
So I will call the question on the amendment, and if the staff could read again what the wording would be for that particular line, please.
I would be develop environmental sustainability, comma, leadership development, comma, and mentorship plans.
Thank you very much. All those in favor of the amendment? And opposed? And the amendment is carried. And I believe Trustee Aziz, you had another amendment.
I do. Thank you, Chair. I'm just pulling up the wonderful document again. Under the two columns that are listed, the orange columns on the first page, under fiduciary responsibilities, if I could kindly add the creation of a needs-based budget for the November to June period. And the reason I would like to bring this forward is given the budget constraints we've seen this past year and the concerns that'll be, I'm sure, heavily discussed amongst staff and discussed amongst our constituents. These budget constraints that have been felt throughout transportation are for sure being felt when it comes to special needs education and so on and so forth. I know that the Toronto District School Board just passed a motion for something similar, and I think it would definitely help with highlighting the way that our board so heavily, like other boards, needs a strong, consistent budget commitments from the province to make sure that we can meet our commitments that we've ambitiously laid out in the strategic plan.
And just to be clear about this, who would you expect to develop the needs-based budget? The board?
I understand this would come to us from staff to the board, yes.
If that's the case, developing a needs-based budget would not, I think, be the board's fiduciary responsibility. It would be something we might conceivably direct staff to do. And I would ask if the executive officer or the director could comment on that, please, before I decide whether this amendment is actually in order.
Through you, Madam Chair, I'd like to comment, then I'll turn over to Executive Officer Giroux. As part of the budgetary process that brings forward the final budget for the previous school year, the 2022-2023 school year, there were a number of fiscal pressure points. As mentioned in conversations with our chair, Chair Evans, and yourself, Vice Chair Scott, as well as Advocacy Committee, there are certainly some areas that staff recognizes are pressure points. Staff will look to, as part of that reconciliation of last year's budget, also signal areas that might be areas that the advocacy committee could bring forward in their work with representatives of the provincial government. There are common ones that through advocacy committee as well as staff have identified that are a series of ones that we can bring forward as part of that report that reconciles the last year's school budget. That would, to my mind, address the concern that Trustee Aziz is bringing forward. And we would be able to do that with information that would indicate where the budget has landed, where we reconcile last year's school budget, and give direction moving forward on areas where we can all advocate for various increases to budget or areas that might be explored by the provincial government or other agencies. So I think in many ways, this is an aspect that staff is looking to bring forward as it is. I feel it's a clear direction, as we do have a number of areas we've identified through advocacy committee, rather than a more open-ended request that I'm not sure what staff would actually be able to bring forward. So I'd much rather do it with concrete information where we know we have some pressure points that again have come forward in a number of areas that seem to be in alignment with where staff also feels there are pressures as mentioned.
The only thing I would add is that the list of fiduciary responsibilities does include developing the 2024-25 budget process and priorities. So that is already on the list. That is the fiduciary responsibility. I guess the question to the mover would be, is this an attempt to amend that or add to it? Because that may inform whether or not it's in order.
Trustee
Sure.
Aziz?
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'm thinking of the motion that accelerates the budgeting process based on student needs before we receive the GSNs. So, or the GSN. So not waiting, but in anticipation of and based on our experience from this year, bringing forth something as a proactive measure. If that's not clear, I'm happy to discuss further.
I think the real question as chair is whether or not this is developing a needs-based budget is necessarily part of the board's fiduciary responsibilities, particularly since we already have in there developing the budget process and priorities is our fiduciary responsibility. And surely whether or not there was a needs-based budget would be part of that. So I guess my inclination would be to rule this out of order on the basis that it would not in fact alter what is already there as a fiduciary responsibility. And we also have under strategies and opportunities, the last bullet there is increase the alignment of the budget with strategic priorities, where needs are part of our strategic priorities.
Chair, if I may, would an amendment to the, oh my goodness, third from the bottom bullet, fourth from the bottom, where it says develop the 2024-2025 budget process and priorities March to June, bring that forward a little bit earlier so we can begin those conversations earlier, as opposed to adding a whole nother fiduciary responsibility. Begin the conversation earlier, because we know from this past year that this the budget conversations are much more hard pressed. There's a lot more to consider. I think we can begin to work with advocacy committee and other partners to really push the board's priorities. Would that be in order?
That would be in order. How early would you like to propose that process should start?
December, please.
So under the fourth from the bottom bullet under fiduciary responsibilities, develop the 2024-2025 budget process and priorities, brackets March to June. So it would become December to June.
Yes, that's correct.
And that's definitely in order.
Thank you.
And my question then, is this a friendly amendment? And Trustee Lyra, you're saying it is not. So we might as well begin the debate. Any further introduction, Trustee Aziz?
No, thank you.
And in that case, we'll go to Trustee Lyra as first speaker.
I'd like to sub-amend it. I think we should start in November on the heels of the other budget. Instead of starting in December, I'd like to start in November on the heels of the previous budget.
So, because we will have just received the audited financial statements for the previous year.
Yeah.
So that is a sub-amendment to change that date to November. Is this a friendly amendment? It is not. So on the sub-amendment, which is to say November instead of December, speakers to that, go ahead and do your introduction.
I think it makes sense to, on the heels of getting our audited financial statements in November, turn around and begin our financial process. The 3-month, 4-month gap in between has always sort of baffled me why we take so much time off before starting the budget process, particularly given that we have earlier timelines in our collective agreements than many other districts in the province. We have to commit to academic staffing quite early in our budget process. And it means that we don't have, I think, the time that we need to meaningfully consult and debate and discuss the budget process. And therefore, I'd like to start it as soon as we possibly can. And that would be with the audited final statements of the previous year in November. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And Ms. Giroux, I believe, has a comment on that.
Just before you pursue the debate, I think it's important that everybody understand the motion on the table, because what started was a motion to add a second budget process, a different kind of budget process, which was why it was ruled out of order, because the idea of a needs-based budget for advocacy purposes is not the same as the approval of a budget for board purposes. So you're now in a conversation about changing the timelines for the board budget process, which is completely in order, but it does not guarantee the development of a needs-based budget. I just don't want people to be conflating those two things and thinking that it's achieving something that it's not. And you may need to get to a point, and maybe that's at budget committee, where you're having a conversation and decision about whether or not you want to create a needs-based budget and have that resource allocation. But this motion is not replacing the motion that was on the floor a minute ago. And I think that needs to be clear.
Thank you for that clarification. Anything further, Trustee Lyra?
I will withdraw my amendment.
You're withdrawing your amendment?
Yeah.
Trustee Jenkins on the amendment?
Trustee Lyra has withdrawn, so I'm fine.
And Trustee Lee?
So on the amendment, I'm against moving the timeline up for the budgeting process, as the bulk of the budgeting process is based upon receiving the GSN. Like, I understand some of our budgeting has to be done due to timelines for collective agreements, and that's to do with academic staffing, but most of our debate on budgeting doesn't happen until we know what the GSN funding looks like for the year. So bringing it up is kind of there's no substance for us to be debating, because it's kind of a up in the air type of debate of what we want in a budget when we don't actually know what the final funding is and what we can do. So bringing up the timeline is kind of just adding more debate without having something to finalize, in my opinion.
Thank you. And Trustee Dixon on the sub-amendment, did I have you?
I agree with what Trustee Lee said. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're back to, Trustee Blackburn on the sub-amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I too agree with Trustee Lee. I mean, adding the budget process, and I know we have a lot of new trustees, and that's great, but the budget process is pretty much the same every year. If we meet November, December, January, all these, there's not going to be a lot to talk about. And we're putting, in my opinion, unnecessary pressure on staff to schedule more meetings, have them away from their families more than they already are. It's the costs, in my opinion, far outweigh any benefits that would happen.
Thank you, Trustee Blackburn. And I misspoke a moment ago. We are back on the amendment because the sub-amendment was withdrawn, and I'm going next to Trustee Bell.
Great, thank you. Through you, Chair. I really appreciate the intent of this motion, which is to ensure that we have the money we need in order to meet the commitments that we're setting out this evening. To me, it seems very basic. And I understand in the past that the GSNs have guided that. And I think that guidance, that relative understanding of what we can expect based on this year and the previous years can help inform a budget that would actually meet the needs that we've set out in our work plan and in our strategic plan. So again, I don't think we have maybe the right wording in the right place currently right now, but I think it is upon us to really think about how we could best ensure that we are reflecting in our work plan that we will in fact create a budget that will meet the needs of our students. And we're not going to hold back from the shortfall in funding that we have received, for example, this year from the province, and the cuts that we have had to make and the choices that we've had to make last year. And so with that in mind, I'm hopeful that when this comes around to board, a suitable phrase or nod to that can actually come forth. I know that I believe it was the Toronto board that just recently did that as well. And if I'm not mistaken, they voted unanimously to do that because they believed that they need to ensure that the province gives them the money they need in order to meet the needs of their children, of the students that they serve. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Are there any other speakers on the amendment? I'm going to ask Trustee Milburn to take the chair for a moment, please.
Happy to. Trustee Scott.
And I appreciate the intent of the amendment. To me, moving the start date up to December instead of March is not entirely tied to the idea of doing a needs-based budget. I think it is really important for the board to begin to establish its priorities for budget earlier than March, because even though we don't know at that point what our funding is likely to be, we do have an understanding of where the pressure points will be, and we do have an understanding of what we are hoping to do within the context of our strategic plan objectives. I think that to be having our first budget meetings in March is really too late to be getting a start on those discussions. There may not be a lot of decisions that could be made early, but I do think we need to begin to consider, once we have an understanding of what the previous year's results were, and we will also by that time have seen at least an initial report on student achievement with some detail attached to that. I do think that it would be good to move that March date up to December. So I will be supporting the amendment. Thank you.
And back to you, Madam Chair.
And Trustee Milburn?
I apologize. I do have a question. I just want to clarify what this amendment will mean. So does this mean that we will have the committee of the whole bracket budget meetings starting in December? I don't know who wants to answer that.
Yes.
True.
Yes. Okay. I think given our budgetary constraints, I would like to say that I'm going to support this amendment. I think that having the discussions even earlier is important. I recognize the impacts that this will have on staff. I'm hoping that there will be fruitful discussion, and we saw that during the budget process last year. So thank you.
Thank you. So I now really do have no other speakers on my list. So back to Trustee Aziz, wrap up on your amendment.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to everyone's patience while we work out how we would like to see this amendment or sub-amendment come forth. Again, as mentioned by my colleagues on the board, having a fulsome conversation around budget ahead of receiving the GSN from the province will allow us to focus on the constraints and pressure points that we felt this year, and no doubt we'll see in the upcoming GSN. And we'll be able to focus on delivering the best education for our students rather than trying to fit a funding formula the province thinks we need. We know our students best, our staff know our students best, and working ahead of the province's schedule allows us more time to advocate for those needs, making sure that our students in the coming year are able to attend these schools with the best staff who are most supported by our board to the best of our abilities, and put us in a best position and a best foot forward for the next school year. So thank you. I hope that my colleagues will support this motion or this amendment.
Thank you. And with the board's indulgence, before I call the question, the director has requested a moment to just speak on this.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. And I do want to turn over to Associate Director Giroir, who will have some comments on. Just want to, I understand the spirit of what the board is bringing forward and the importance of the conversations, but do want to reiterate that it's staff's responsibility to bring to the board the realities of the funding provided, the projections that come along with that. I understand the proactive spirit of what's being requested, but it does run a risk that information received later then has to be reconciled with potential conversations had earlier. And I think the board understands that. I just want to make that clear and turn over to Associate Director Giroir.
Through you, Chair. I think my major concern is depending on the information that you would want to start to receive in December, that would be useful to you in developing your needs. Because I only have one staff and they are already in part of the financial cycle working on the revised estimates in December and trying to sort out submissions to the ministry and keeping things chugging along as part of that process. So if it's just to get together and talk about the needs, that's fine, right? Like what the priorities would be. But if it was to get my staff, my finance staff, who would be otherwise occupied doing the revised estimates and other parts of the budgeting process that I could not pull them away from, or else I would not be able to meet my ministry obligations with the financial cycle that's currently in place. There's a reason why it doesn't start until the data starts. So I just want to set expectations up now by voting this in, that the amount of information that I would be able to provide as a framework for you to have those discussions would be very minimal. And unless it would involve a significant increase to my staff, which has actually decreased over the past couple of years, it wouldn't be possible.
Thank you very much for that, Associate Director. It's important for us to have a realistic understanding of what is possible in those early discussions. And Trustee Bell, we've already had wrap up on the motion. I did indulge staff because they felt it was important to make sure we understood the implications here. So I will not go to you as another speaker. And we'll go directly to call the question on the amendment, which would change the word March to December in terms of the 2024-2025 budget process and priorities development. So calling the question, all those in favor of that amendment? And opposed? And I think that carries 6-4.
That was my count as well.
6-4. So that amendment is carried. Did you have anything further, Trustee Aziz?
No, and thank you to staff for their feedback and comments and patience while we get that amendment through.
And in terms of the board work plan, I didn't have any other speakers on my list. So if we have no more, Trustee Lee, did you wish to speak on the board work plan?
Sorry, just a quick clarification. Isn't it 50 plus 1 to pass a motion? So 6.
Sorry, say again?
Isn't it 50% plus 1 to 51% to pass a motion? So 6
It's
is
the majority of those present and voting. So 6-4 does carry it. It doesn't have to be 7 if we don't have everybody who is here and voting. So, but it still has to be approved at board. So with that, no other speakers. I will go back to the mover for wrap up. Trustee Bell.
Well, thanks to everyone for bringing forth a very constructive conversation and really, I think, essential and important questions and issues that need to be addressed. But I think it's very telling that the conversation was not as long as others in the past, that the board has done an incredible job of bringing forth a very clear and concise work plan. I will quickly comment and say I really hope that the board will be able to appoint sufficient resources and staff to meet the vision that we are putting forth tonight. And so this is in particular with regards to the budget, which is essential to everything that we plan to do. And so I am hopeful that those conversations will be happening behind the scenes. And with that, those are my closing remarks. And I'd just like to say thank you to all of the trustees around the table and to staff. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Bell. So I will call the question then on the motion that's on the floor that the 2023-2024 board work plan and areas of focus as outlined in Appendix A to report 2023-071 and as amended be approved. All those in favor? And opposed? And that motion is carried. Moving forward then, we have a few information items here, beginning with the report from the Ontario Public School Boards Association.
Madam
Is
Chair,
there an
it's
update?
almost 9 o'clock.
I beg your pardon?
It's almost 9 o'clock. And I see people leaving to take a break. Can we take a 10-minute
It
break?
is 9 o'clock, but I expect this will only take about 10 minutes. So.
Okay.
And if we get into something that's going to take longer, then we will have a break. Trustee Jenkins, is there a report from the Ontario Public School Boards Association?
Thank you, Chair. There's no report at this time, although Trustee Scott and myself will be attending the OPSPA Annual Advocacy Day to be held on November the 27th. And OPSPA representatives from across Ontario will be meeting with ministers, MPPs, and to discuss issues of importance.
Any questions on that, trustee or Ms. Lyon from Parent Involvement Committee?
Thank you, Chair. One day, maybe. Trustee Jenkins, last year, we had a discussion about OPSPA's progress on the Truth and Reconciliation calls to action. And I believe that you had mentioned there was a report last year at the conference that you attended. And we had talked about whether or not an update to that information would be available, and if perhaps you could seek that information on progress. So I guess I'm asking if you could do that at the November 27th or upcoming discussion with your colleagues. Thank you.
Happy to take that forward. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Lyon. And seeing no other hands on this, move on to item 10.2 in our agenda, the OSTA update. And Trustee Lee, do we have an update from OSTA this evening?
There's no other major update other than what was posted publicly by OSTA with regards to the appointment of interim operations manager Cindy Owens and for the period ending October 31st.
Thank you for that. Are there any questions for Trustee Lee? And I'm seeing none. Ministry initiatives, and we do have one new document that is in our agenda package. This is relating to a ministry memo from September 28th regarding updates on several ministry initiatives that started this fall. Any comment on that or any questions, Trustee Lee or Trustee Lyra, sorry?
So the ministry memo has two parts. It has a public part and a for specific boards part. Is there or was there a section directly for our board?
Director?
Through you, Madam Chair, normally as these are monthly updated memoranda, there is usually what Chair Evans is speaking to, broader memoranda for the entire province, and then some specific ones, or a memoranda that then breaks down what a particular allocation happened to be for any given district school board, including our own. So in short, yes, board specific aspects of the overall monthly summary of memoranda.
Trustee Lara?
Is it something you can either expand on in public or release publicly, given that you've released the public part, like half of the memo, but not the other half of the memo? Or is it not something we can release publicly?
Through you, Madam Chair, normally those are just the allocated allotment, and that's usually prorated, so to speak, for the size of a board. So it would be similar for every memoranda when there was an attachment, or it's just information that every district has to put into play. But all of that, especially the district allocation, would come through in our budgetary alignment that Associate Director Giroir pointed out.
So we are going to release it publicly.
I think because it's part of there, and those are all hyperlinks, if I'm not mistaken, it can be accessed. I'm just checking with the manager.
I'm not certain there was any targeted communication for our board in this memo. I think that's just the ministry standard line. But so when there are allocations, it's as the director explained, but I don't think there were any particular ones for this.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on this information item? Trustee Presley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you. Is there a possibility of us receiving this as an email so that we are able to access the hyperlinks provided in the memo?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, I think that probably is directed solely to staff rather than
I see.
publicly released. Although in principle, you've got the summary here by an overall summary of each of the memoranda, but I think that would probably be through their on structure, which is for staff in essence.
Thank you for that, Director. Just to clarify, so would that mean that it is restricted to staff only, or would trustees be privy to that information? By email? Is that appropriate?
In essence, if it's tied to our budgetary process, it would come out again in the
Okay.
allocation that our associate director would bring forward.
Thank you very much. That's all.
And I'm not seeing any other questions on this. So that brings us to new business. Any information or inquiries? Ms. Lyon from PIC.
Thank you, Madam Chair. 2 items very quickly. I would encourage all trustees and anybody in fact watching who's tuned in tonight, please attend the family parent conference on November 4th at Brookfield High School. It starts at 8:30 in the morning. Ontario's Poet Laureate is our keynote speaker, and he's amazing. He's a young man of color. He's from Toronto. He's amazing. Please come. Please talk to your families and parents in your districts. Promote it on your Facebook pages, your formerly known as Twitter accounts. Please let people know. There will be sort of a trade show area with tables. PIC will be there. The other advisory committees will be there. There will be a number of community organizations there. There's usually 25 to 30 community tables. There's lots of free parking. There's good bus service. It takes place at Brookfield High School. And it's the majority of PIC's budget for the year that gets spent on this conference. So please come and see how that money is spent. I hope it will meet your satisfaction. The other thing I wanted to mention was that the PIC meeting of November 15th and the Committee of the Whole meeting of November 21st will be my last meetings as PIC representative as my term is ending. And I no longer have a child in the OCDSB, so I wanted to just let members know that. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Lyon. And I'm not sure whether we should be saying congratulations on no longer having a child in the OCDSB, or whether we should be just expressing our appreciation for everything that you've contributed to PIC and to our meetings. So thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And any other new business information or inquiries? And I'm not seeing any. So we have reached the end of our agenda, and I declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.